Wolfville, Acadia, and Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people, where we continue to understand the truths and begin the journey of reconciliation. My name is Oonagh Proudfoot, and I'm the Executive Director of Alumni Affairs in the Office of Advancement at Acadia. It's a pleasure to be here this evening with our guests, who will be chatting to us about the world of student services and student supports on the Acadia University campus as we return to in-person learning this year, as well as a special focus on our new students. During the course of the evening, we will be posing questions to our panelists and asking for updates and input from their various areas and what they're bringing to the conversation. We do encourage folks who are on the line to ask questions either in the chat function, so I will keep an eye on the chat function if that's where you'd like to pop your question, or by all means at points in time if you'd like to raise your virtual hand, you can do that as well. And also we have small numbers, so you are more than welcome to turn your video on and your microphone on and ask your question as we proceed through the course of the conversation as well. We have entered your names into a draw, and we do have winners of the draw. So we'll get to that at the end of the evening, or at the end of the session rather. And we do have a backup in case folks whose name we have drawn are not on the line. So that's it for housekeeping. I will now introduce our panelists. So please join me in welcoming our panelists for this evening's discussion. First, we have Janique Ellis, a recent graduate of Acadia University, receiving a BSc Honors in Psychology and Sociology in May 2021. During her time at Acadia, she worked as a student leader to transform the spaces around her to make them more diverse and inclusive for all students of color. She has served as a student advocate, mentor, and confidant for many students. Janique is the co-founder of the Acadia International Society, which was created to facilitate a bonding experience for international students and domestic students, and also served as the co-president of the Acadia University Psychology Association for 2 consecutive years. Currently, she is the Student Success Programmer at Acadia, and in this role is organizing new student orientation for fall 2021. Thank you, Janique, for joining us.
You're welcome, thank you.
James Sanford, who's been here a little longer than Janique, class of 1987, has been a resident of the town of Wolfville since 2004, and currently is employed with Acadia University as Executive Director, Student Services. The focus of his work is to actively be involved in and support student success by providing leadership for the delivery of health, counseling, and accessibility services, student advising, student conduct, student recreation, support for international, Indigenous, and students of African descent, as well as residence life. Just a little portfolio. James is also actively engaged in a number of regional and national initiatives. He is co-chair of the Atlantic Association of Universities, the AAU Healthy Campuses Committee, focused on student mental health initiatives. James was directly involved in the founding and development of the Canadian Post-Secondary Education Partnership on Alcohol Harms. Volunteering is a very important component of James's involvement in the community, and he currently serves as president of the Valley District Soccer Association and has been active as a coach for over 10 years. James recently became a board member of the L'Arche Home Fires organization in Wolfville. Thank you, James, for joining us.
Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, originally from Vancouver, BC, Matthew Rios, class of 2014. Came to study at Acadia in the fall of 2009. While pursuing a BA in politics, he got involved in student leadership, serving as ASU president for 2 years. Upon graduating, Matthew went to work for an NGO in Ottawa, Ontario, where he worked as a government and stakeholder relations officer. For 3 years, he lobbied parliamentarians, public servants, and industry stakeholders on issues pertaining to education and youth employment. In 2016, he relocated to Melbourne, Australia, where he pursued a Master of International Business. Beyond exploring Australia and soaking in the sun, he also secured a graduate placement with KPMG, focused on international privacy regulations and cybersecurity. In 2019, Matthew returned to Halifax, Nova Scotia, where he accepted a position at Davis Pierre, a company focused on public sector consulting. During his time at Davis Pierre, he has been involved in a number of transformation projects in the disability sector, the housing sector, and in the mental health sector. Over the last year, Matthew has been involved in coordinating Nova Scotia's COVID-19 response. Since July 2020, he's been supporting public health, the Department of Health and Wellness, and others to develop and implement the province's testing strategies. In recent months, he has also been added to the province's COVID-19 immunization task force, which is responsible for implementing Nova Scotia's vaccination strategy. When he's not working, Matthew is an avid soccer player, reader, and cook. He also serves as a director on the L'Arche Home Fires Board, as well as the Acadia Alumni Board as vice president. So again, welcome to the three of you. Thank you so much for joining us. With the three of you combined, we're dealing with a bit of a powerhouse crew here this evening, so we're really excited to have you. And we'll hopefully pick your brains and get some great information from you, some updates from the campus. As I said, the transition back to campus for our students, our returning students, and our students who are starting for the first time in the fall, it will look very different for all of them this coming year, because we are transitioning carefully and with much due diligence out of a closed campus. So there will be some questions, I'm sure, about that, and we actually look for updates from you about that. But generally speaking and broader speaking, we are looking for updates on services and supports on campus that we now have for our students, and certainly moving forward, additional supports that we're hoping to implement in the next little while. So I know that each of you have significant perspectives to bring to the conversation. How I'd like to start is by asking each of you to share with us a couple of minutes about who you are. I mean, yes, I've just read your biographies, but tell us a little bit about why you're here on this panel this evening and what you're bringing to the conversation. So I guess more specifically, the roles that you're in now and the perspectives that you're bringing in the bigger conversation about our students who are coming back to campus. So I'm going to start by asking Matt. We'll start with you, and then we'll follow by James, and then we'll ask Janique to pull up the rear. So I'll stop talking for a few minutes and hand it over to you, Matt, please.
Yeah, it's great, Oonagh, and thank you for the introductions. And again, I feel like we're scraping the bottom of the barrel with me here, particularly with both Janique and James. I'm really excited to hear directly from them. I'm the vice president of the Alumni Association and have really never left Acadia since I came onto that campus in September of 2009. I came from British Columbia. I was probably the worst example of what you want in a discerning student. I had never done a site visit on campus. We drove down Main Street for the first time, and I remember falling head over heels the first time I saw you all. So I've had a long love affair with our institution. I met my fiance there. We absolutely love Wolfville, and my connection runs deep, not only at the institution on the Alumni Association, but also with L'Arche Home Fires, a not-for-profit in the community. So, the reason I'm here is I'm certainly invested not only in the institution, but the success of our students. Student experience, student life has been an incredibly important part of my story at Acadia. You mentioned the fact that I was involved in student leadership. I got to work alongside people like Janique, who would have been organizing welcome weeks way back when, and of course the evergreen James Sanford, and you yourself, Oonagh, at the time in student services. We all worked alongside to try to deliver on the promise of Acadia. And as far as I'm concerned, what Acadia does better than any institution in this country is it provides wraparound supports to support its students, and by extension, those students as families. I truly believe we take very seriously the responsibility of taking care of our students, and that starts the day you walk on campus, and I believe that extends well past the time you graduate into your alumni years as well. So we're joined today by a few of our board members from our Alumni Association, and I know we all feel very strongly that we as an institution have an obligation once you start, but then well after you end your time at Acadia. And I'm certainly looking forward to some of the ways, or I'm looking forward to talking about some of the ways that we're hoping to offer additional supports moving forward, particularly as it relates to mentorship and career services. So that's probably the reason I'm here tonight, but I'm certainly excited to hear from both Janique and James as well about what a post-COVID or a living with COVID welcome week looks like this year.
Thank you, Matt. Over to you, James.
Thank you. I guess the simple dry answer is that I'm here because you asked me to be here, Oonagh. So I think certainly this is one more opportunity for us to talk about what it means to be focused on the student experience at Acadia University. You know, the most recent part of our history, if we're going back the last 18 months or so, there's been a lot of challenges, but I certainly take a lot of pride in that. I believe since the day that we identified that things were going to change in terms of how we delivered that student experience, that the people in not only student services but across the campus have been tremendously dedicated and focused on trying to make this the best possible experience for our students. We've learned a lot through that process. I think our students have learned a lot, and we've learned a lot from our students as well. They've been active. They've taught us some really important lessons about what's most important in not only in the student experience, but in life in general. We've learned a lot in the last 18 months, and so I think that has served us all well. And I'm really pleased to be part of this discussion tonight. I will say, I think Matt does himself a disservice in terms of his involvement here. I've been at Acadia long enough to have experienced some really positive and great moments, as I think everyone on this call probably has. Acadia, like any other institution and any other community, also has some times which challenge us, and they're not so great times. And I had the benefit of having Matt as a strong student leader during sort of two of our most challenging times, one 10 years ago and one shortly after that. So it's always great to be able to share the stage with Matt and appreciate everything he does, not only when he was here as a student, but what he's doing now as an alumnus. So thank you.
Yeah, he's a lifer, and we'll take him. Thank you, James. Over to you, Janique.
I guess for me, I'm an international student. So as soon as I came, I fell in love with Acadia because they listen to students. So from my experience with the things that I didn't like, I spoke up and they changed it. And even though the change didn't come instantly, it came, and it came while I was around. And I was at Acadia for 5 years, and I think that's a quick turnaround time for change. So I fell in love with improving the lives of students. I had the great joy of being James' co-op student for quite some time, and I fell in love with his idea to consistently back up students no matter what, to consistently bring joy to their lives by any means possible. And I love that. And so I guess that's why I'm here. I love Acadia. I have told all of my friends about Acadia and why it's a school that they should think about, because if you don't like something here, you have the opportunity to change it, and you have the opportunity to make it better every single time. Your concerns are valid, and it doesn't fall on deaf ears, and I love that.
Thank you, Janique. And I'm certainly, you're preaching to the choir when you share that with me, because it was about 22 years ago that James drew me in with that same mentality and that same leadership. So I'm certainly on the same page with you. So thank you for those brief introductions. We're going to hear a lot more from you, from your various perspectives and your roles within our campus community. But I'm not letting a couple of you off with some of what you said in your opening remarks, and I'm going to swing back around and ask a question each of James and Janique. So James, you said that you learned a lot from our students about life in general. Can you think of one particular example that you're willing to share with us on that?
Yeah, I think the certainly for our institution, if you go back into our recent past, there have been I think some strong efforts made to recognize that our student population is not homogeneous, that there's people come from all over the world, and there's different needs that are presented to us. I think a lot of this thought process started with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report. which really identify the work that was needed to bring about change in our relationship with Indigenous students. And I think some of those things had begun in earnest. But I think certainly over the last year, I think we've really started to recognize the fact that we also need to look at how we deal with students from not only other parts of the world, but within our own communities who identify as of African descent. And I think that's been sort of a real key piece for me. I think a lot of the focus and attention that we've had has been on national sort of engagement and reflection on our work with our Indigenous populations. And I think now we're starting to recognize that we also need to provide that same attention and support and really take a look at this on a provincial level. We have many communities in our province that speak to the fact that, 25, 30, 35 years ago, Acadia was a destination for our African Nova Scotian students. And so something has changed, something has gotten lost in that time, and I think we need to recapture that. And I think over the last several months, that's been something that has emerged from the work that not only that we do on a daily basis, but the recognition of the need to look at this from an institutional standpoint. The President's Anti-Racism Task Force was a big step in that direction. I think we're all looking forward to the President's response to that report and what we can do as an institution to make change that's going to be systemic and long lasting.
Absolutely. And James, I appreciate that you referenced PART, or the President's Advisory Task Force. And most of you have spoken in the first few minutes fairly generally. So I would ask you, as we proceed through the conversation, by all means, when an opportunity presents itself, to give a specific example and a specific initiative, because I certainly think that our listeners, both this evening and through the recording, will be interested to hear, as you say, James, the work that has been done over the last several years and continues to happen on campus, so that folks know what is new. We had a quick chat before we started this evening with one of our board members who said, she's long past the parent stage of students, but she said, I'm just really interested to know how it looks so different at Acadia now than it did when I was a student. So some of those specific examples we absolutely look forward to hearing. And the next question is to you, Janique, and in your intro you referenced when there were things that you didn't like, you spoke up and you were able to affect change. I'm wondering if there's an example of one such instance that you're willing to share with us.
Yeah, so as I said before, I am an international student. And so when I came, orientation for international students looked different. So it was almost separate, where you had domestic students coming like 3 days after international students came, and there was this huge lull in those 3 days where you're lost, you don't know anyone, you don't know, and all the buildings look alike. It was just a huge confusion. And so in 2019, a bunch of students just reported, and we just decided it needs to change. And in 2019, I was placed on the orientation committee, and we made that change. And so that huge lull where no one is on campus and no one is around to actually help international students, it's gone. We have RAs that are out of training, ready to help international students. We have international student ambassadors, and we have new student mentors who will be there helping students. All the employees are now going to be on campus, walking around, aiding and giving directions. We actually have a schedule of activities for international students to do during those 3 days. So the 3 days are core to the international student experience, because international students need additional information, like immigration information, during those days, and they need to understand campus. Those 3 days are core. So we didn't want to remove the 3 days. We wanted to just enhance the experience in the 3 days. And now if you look at the orientation schedule on the Welcome Week website, that the experience is enhanced.
Terrific. Thank you, Janique. And speaking of arrival on campus and orientation, I'm going to come back to you, Matt. And go back to your intro and coming from Vancouver, BC, and what is it folks call the West Coast, the best coast, but I think maybe you came from the best coast to an even better coast, perhaps. So you came all the way from Vancouver, BC. It was sort of sight unseen for you. What was the experience like, and what eased the transition? Because you spoke of feeling like you were really part of it right away. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm smiling listening to Janique's experience because I'll be candid. I felt a little bit like an international student when I arrived in Wolfville the first time. There was a new vocabulary to learn. Certainly, you know, a new city to get used to. And for me, I just was taken in not only by the beauty of the campus, but the beauty of the people. I was very lucky to have incredible RAs, incredible student leaders in the residence that I lived in. I felt from the get-go, it was made clear not only to me, but to my parents would tell you this, that we were entering into this fraternity called Acadia that would ensure we were taken care of both in the classroom and out. And that was both the experience that I had, but then a responsibility I felt since my first year at university, right? So I've been involved in student leadership, even informally, from my second year, getting involved in Welcome Week, wanting to get involved in House Council, wanting to try and support students who were coming from similar experiences like me, coming far away from home, leaving home for the very first time. And I know not only is that scary for parents, and I certainly know that that's scary for parents, it was really nerve-wracking for me as a young person coming there. And as I said, I was really lucky to know that there, really was a no wrong door policy at Acadia. If you needed counseling services and end up in your faculty member's office, they would be able to direct you. If you were looking for career service supports, there was a co-op office that would be able to direct you, or faculty that would be able to direct you and connect you, or an alumni office that would be able to connect you with mentors. And I think over the years, what I've observed is we've built on our success, and what I always smile hearing about, and I think James commented on it so aptly, which is we can't be complacent on what we do as a campus. We are an institution with a storied history, and I think we do a lot of things good. But that doesn't mean we stop and can rest on our laurels. We need to continue to evolve and iterate. And I'm really happy to see that some of the services that I was able to benefit from as a student, things like counseling, things like tutoring, things like the English Center, those resources have iterated over the years to meet the needs of students. And to James's point, they've also realized it's not a homogenized population. Not all individuals have the same needs. So we've added to our service offering, which I think really ensures we're supporting students where they are. And from my experience, I was a huge beneficiary, and I'm hopeful and confident that students today will continue to be beneficiaries as well.
Appreciate that, Matt, and certainly, it wasn't a long time ago that you had your orientation to Acadia, but it is a while ago, and your answer is a good segue into a question for James, who, like I said, has been around a lot longer. So I'll get as many digs in as I can, James. So before I pose my next question to you, James, I am just going to remind folks on the line that if you have questions, please pop them in the chat function, or by all means, raise your virtual hand. Just as Matt and Janique and James are talking about certain things, if they're referencing something that you're not familiar with and you'd like more of an explanation, by all means, that's what this conversation is for. Fairly informal and definitely unscripted. So James, over to you as a segue from both Janique and Janique's most recent experience and Matt's from about a decade or so ago. How do both of those experiences evolve into what the student experience at Acadia looks like this fall?
I think the key to that answer is exactly what Matt and Janique both referenced, is that we've not just kind of used a cookie cutter approach where we identify that, okay, this was our orientation experience, and so we'll continue just to trot this out every year. I think that has evolved significantly over time. Some of that is things that we've learned ourselves. Some of that has come from things that have happened at sister institutions that we've learned from, in terms of what are appropriate activities and what are activities that we need to think more about or more thoughtfully about in terms of that preparation. I think with what Janique has referenced is important in that for a long time and certainly probably closer to 20 to 25 years than not, we've tried to, and I think we've done a good job of engaging our student union leadership as partners in the delivery of the orientation program, and that's to me been a key fundamental piece. It takes a bit of work because typically, unless we're fortunate, like we were on a couple of occasions, and we have the same person returning as president, it does require some transition and some planning work because you're responding to a new group of leaders. So. But I think that's been one thing that's consistent, the content and the delivery, and sometimes the program itself changes, but the fact that student leaders are part of that planning and preparation hasn't really changed dramatically over that period of time. So I think that's really the key to this, is that we've been able to stay relevant by listening to students, by hearing what students have said about their experiences, and especially when they move into leadership roles, they draw on those experiences to offer advice. And so I think we've identified, and we have some really good people in roles. I'm not as connected to the Welcome experience as I have been, but we've got some really good people who listen and follow that sort of concept of listening to what students are saying and really hearing what the underlying message is. So for me, that's certainly one of the keys to having those experiences remain successful year over year.
Absolutely, and you referenced the student union, and there's an MOU that exists between the university, the student union, and the town of Wolfville. So what does that conversation with the town look like, overlaying, maybe not just specifically Welcome Week, but throughout the whole process of the pandemic and transitioning back to campus? What's that conversation looking like?
The conversation is a regular conversation since the pandemic began. We've established regular communication that involves the town, the university, and the student union, and a lot of that is focused on how we ensure that that the students and our local community are in alignment on issues related to the pandemic and in relation to our public health directives and our work to do our best to be supportive of not only each of us in the Acadia community, but the residents of the town of Wolfville as well. And I think we saw a lot of those good pieces emerge both early, but as the pandemic went on last September with the mandatory quarantine requirements in place. We saw folks both in the community and in the student leadership roles step up to help buy groceries for people, make sure people had what they needed to stay and follow those guidelines, follow those directives appropriately. So I think there was a tremendous focus on how do we work together to do this. There's been a lot of work done over the past 6 or 8 months around the concept of good neighbors and creating relationships between the students and the permanent residents. We've learned a lot during that time. There are lots of challenges associated with that. It's a relationship that is fraught with individuals who their enthusiasm may be a little bit exceeding that of the capacity for the local community to absorb, and so we have to find ways to balance that. But I think the good thing is that every week we get back together and we talk about what's been going on and what we've learned and how do we build on that. We've seen some significant evolution in our student code of conduct, our non-academic judicial student code of conduct. And a lot of that evolution has come from contributions from the local community as well as the student leadership. And so, again, rather than trying to stay consistent with something that has existed for a long time, we've been open to making change to that particular process so that we can better respond. We've used the pandemic as an opportunity to create relationships with the town so that students who are identified as having been, I guess, run afoul of the public health directives and some of the requirements, we've created ways to make sure that they can have an audience with some of our staff so we can talk through sort of what does it look like to be in compliance, and making sure they understand why these directives are in place and the value that they bring to the community. So again, it's ongoing work, and I think we're going to continue. We had a meeting this morning, and we've re-upped for another several months of regular Monday morning meetings just to see how we're doing. And I think that will serve us well as we try and respond if there are concerns that come from neighbors about what is happening in that relationship, and we'll build off that.
Excellent, thank you. Janique and Matt, I'm actually just going to ask on that overview from James, if either of you have additional comments or reactions to what James just shared with us.
No.
I'm just looking to see. There you go.
Yeah, I'm smiling only, Oonagh, because it's nice to know that while there are new areas of focus, and I think that's a really positive, there's always going to be areas that are consistent. And I certainly know over the last 11 years, our relationship with the community has continued to be one that is both a work in progress, but is also one to be celebrated. I've been lucky enough to visit a number of post-secondary campuses across the country, some of which are more or less integrated than ours, both physically and in terms of its connections. And I tend to believe that the relationship that we have with the town, and when I started, the late Mayor Stead was on his way out as mayor, and certainly my experience both as a student and then a student leader and then as an alumnus has been incredibly tight-knit with the town administration, and I think it just adds to the vibrancy of your experience as a student. I look at the picture behind you, Oonagh, and you can't help but as a student be completely immersed within the community, and I know that that's something that enhances the student experience. I know during my time as a student leader, one of the biggest problems we had is that we had too many students who wanted to volunteer and not enough volunteer opportunities within the community of Wolfville. When you think of a program like Smile at the time, we had more volunteers than we had individuals we could support. It's one of the reasons why at the time the student union partnered with L'Arche Home Fires so that we could expand our volunteer footprint. I just think of the fact that, we have a very unique student population, 80% of them who volunteer, at least again at the time we're volunteering. I'm sure those numbers are similar today. I think the interaction between campus and the town is one to be celebrated, and one where, it's easy to get detracted by one or two negative experiences or experiences of learning. I really like James's framing of enthusiasms, but I think there's just so many amazing stories in that relationship as well, and it's one that I certainly look back fondly at.
Thanks.
I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention, Oonagh, that along with sort of the theoretical and the anticipatory piece of reacting to things that happen, I think there's some good examples of some really proactive work that's going on when you look at the programming work that's happening between the town of Wolfville and the athletics department, with opportunities for children and youth. Facility development on the campus, specifically the Kroll Tower area with the skate park and the basketball courts. Those are all examples of how programs benefit the community, but they also benefit our campus, whether it's employment for students or whether it's access to facilities and spaces that students may or may not take advantage of if they have to walk all the way downtown. So it is I think important to recognize there's a lot of tangible pieces to this MOU and this relationship as well.
Absolutely, and totally appreciate that long walk downtown. We hear about it often. James, I believe that there are two opportunities, or two separate time slots rather, for on-campus testing for the fall. Just wondering if you have that off the top of your head that you can share with folks so that they have an idea of what that testing accessibility is during the school year.
Yeah, so Carolina Landry, our occupational health nurse, has been working extremely diligently over the course of the summer to create voluntary testing opportunities on campus. Often we find ourselves in a challenge for resources, and she's doing a great job of seeking out volunteers and others to help support. But Monday afternoons in the chapel basement and Thursday evenings at the athletic complex will be the voluntary testing sites and location times. So we're encouraging members of our community to use those as an opportunity to reassure themselves that things are going well. Obviously, if someone has symptoms, they still follow the normal COVID-19 testing protocols and reach out for an appointment to be tested at an appropriate venue. But for those with no symptoms but wanting to just be reassured, it's a great opportunity to do that. So
terrific, thank you. And James, that's a great segue into a question for you, Janique, in how are we implementing safety precautions for the in-person orientation?
Yeah, so orientation this year is going to look a little bit different from it did previous years. So we have hired new student mentors who are upper year students who are going to be paired with first year students. And each of them are going to have a group of 10 to 15 students to guide throughout our orientation activities. Our orientation activities they're sectioned into groups. So if you're in group so-and-so, you'll be able to go to this event at a different location than the other groups. That's how we're doing it. And all optional activities, students are going to need to sign up to attend so we can have contact tracing. We're still, according to our mask policy, all students will be required to be wearing masks and social distancing will be in place. And students will be encouraged to go and take the regular testing opportunities. And I think we will have vaccine clinics on campus and around Wolfville.
Terrific, thank you. And certainly for the folks on the line, if there are additional questions, please feel free to ask. And we certainly recognize as a campus and a community that COVID and keeping ourselves safe and our community members safe is definitely an overlying principle in everything that we're planning for as we transition into the fall. But certainly that is only one piece of all of the transition aspects that we will be covering and taking care of and certainly providing programming and supports for. So we'll certainly reference a few more of those. Janique, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I should add also that our orientation plan is going to the province and it is being approved. So we're doing everything responsibly as best as we can to protect our students and our staff members as well.
Terrific, thank you. Matt, back to you. So we heard from student services aspect. We talked about the ASU. We talked about the town. So just asking for some feedback and input from you on about Acadia alumni and how the association and the board contributes to student life at Acadia, both during Welcome Week and beyond.
Feels like a bit of a softball, because that's perfect, because that's certainly an area that's one of interest and one of investment. And it's interesting. Our Alumni Association has a mandate, of course, to have we have an interest not only in our alumni community, but of the institution itself. And I tend to believe that being a steward of Acadia means being a fierce protector of its greatest assets, which are our students. So I feel very strongly that when our board of directors get together, we're constantly asking ourselves, not only how does this support alumnus, but how does this support students who hopefully will be future alumni? And for me, that takes many different shapes throughout our year and into the future. So, we are broad supporters of scholarship. We support a number of different events and programming throughout the year, events during Welcome Week, Grad Weekend, We support clubs and societies as well as the student union on a number of different initiatives from year to year. We support athletics and our athletes, our student athletes, when they're going to divisional games or national championships, and there's need for financial support. That's one of the primary roles that we play. Beyond that, though, there's significant work being done to sort of broaden and I think formalize what I would call is a focus in career services and mentorship. This is an area that we know already takes place. I myself have been a huge beneficiary of mentorship throughout my time as an Acadia student and once I graduated. And many of those mentors sat on the alumni board. I know one of our participants this evening is Charles Cole. At the time, he was the Alumni Association president. He was a great mentor to me, certainly during my time as a student leader. For me, what we've been looking to do is grow and develop programming that supports students where they're at, helping them develop not only in identifying what their career interests are, but also what their life interests are, realizing that a job is one part of a full life. It is not the only part, but it is one that students are increasingly interested about, particularly as it relates to planning for the future. So we've actually worked very closely with James and with our co-op office to really focus on developing programming that supports and formalizes mentorship, connectivity with alumni that may be in an area of interest for you. And then beyond that, and I think I've just got a puppy who's joining me here. And then beyond that, looking to really intentionally develop some of those basic fundamental pieces around resume development, interview prep, future, if you're going to do future studies, making sure that you're able to talk to individuals that can support you with those generalized testings. All of those pieces are areas that we're developing right now. And my understanding is we are presently going to search for a new individual who will be responsible for coordinating not only our incredible co-op office, but also a career service office. So that's an area of interest, and the alumni office and our alumni board have been very actively involved, not only in doing the research around that piece, but also hopefully partnering with the institution to be able to make sure that that programming meets the needs of students.
Absolutely, and appreciate that overview, Matt, and the specific examples that you gave as well. James, I know you've been a part of the conversation all the way along around the career services development piece, and wonder if you have anything else that you would like to add.
I think two things. One, we're absolutely grateful to the Alumni Association for prioritizing this as a project and a need for our students. It's a clear need, and I look forward to us becoming much more competitive in this area in terms of what we provide to our students. It's one area that there's been a gap, and it's going to be addressed. I think the other piece to that is that there is widespread enthusiasm on the campus for this move and for this effort. We've got some tremendous folks who work in cooperative education. We've got one of the most respected programs in the country, and I don't think it's going to be very long before our career services portfolio is recognized in the same way. So this is just simply a great news story.
So this one may be a little out of left field, but when we're talking about career services and mentorship and the importance of it, the question about how important it is in the development of students. And frankly, I'm not going to ask you, James, and I'm not going to ask you, Matt. I'm going to ask you, Janique. Just that overarching sort of philosophical approach to the importance of those key catchphrases that we toss around a lot: career services, co-op learning, mentorship, and what type of contribution to student development from a student perspective, or a very, very recent student perspective, that you have on that question.
I am a co-op baby. A co-op raised me. Co-op made me who I am today. So I remember the first time I went into my co-op advisor's office, and she helps me with my resume and my cover letter. And the first co-op interview that I did, and I was extremely nervous. and they didn't give me the call until like almost school had ended. I had moved out of res. I found my own apartment. I was so nervous, but I kept calling her and she was like, okay, Janique, I got you. Just calm down. You're gonna hear something. You're gonna hear something. I think co-op and career services at University at Acadia is very, very important. I had the opportunity, James has been my co-op. He was my co-op supervisor for 2 co-op terms. An amazing, amazing mentor, taught me a lot. He taught me specifically how to handle when somebody tells me no, but I still needed to get done. He has showed me how to do that, how to react, and it's so important because that's something I wouldn't learn in classes. So you learn these practical skills that you can take and even hand it to a professor and they give you an A, you know. So I think career services, understanding how to write your resume, understanding the appropriate questions to ask at an interview, understanding how to answer questions appropriately are so vital to student growth. I mean, once you get a degree and you leave university, it's great to have a degree, but if you don't know how to handle it properly, how to use it properly, it's almost like, what was the point? And so I love co-op because co-op taught me how to use my degree properly to enhance my skills and to gain more knowledge.
You know, and I said at the beginning that it's a fairly informal discussion and not scripted. And yeah, I mean, obviously some of the questions are scripted. I want you all to know that that was not scripted. So brilliant response, Janique. Thank you for that. But I think it just therein lies, you know, exactly what we're saying about this institution, you know, and the size of the institution and the ability that we have to be able to have real relationships and real connections with our students, whether it be faculty, staff, alumni, community members, or whomever. Janique, when you answered that question, you spoke about your anxiety level. You spoke about being stressed, and even that whole concept of career services and thinking about careers when you're a student and sort of what life looks like after Acadia, and even the anxiety that comes with that, the competition for jobs, the understanding of whether or not you chose the right degree and whether or not that degree will be the right segue into a career. And what that brings for me is a bigger picture thinking around mental health. And a question that I think I'll pose to you, James, about student mental health at Acadia and how it's supported. I come from a long few years in student services myself, but haven't been there in a very long time. So are there initiatives or supports that are notable to mention here this evening?
Thanks, Oonagh. Yeah, I think, you know, there's no secret that the student mental health has become it's always been part of the conversation, but I think pretty much in the last 10 years has really emerged as one of those fundamental pieces that need to be in place for students to be successful. Students need to feel well. They need to be able to adapt to certain situations. And I think Janique pointed it out, much like resume writing or other skills, you have to develop certain skills, whether it's around resiliency, whether it's around managing anxiety. So those things take time to develop, and you need the appropriate resources and leadership in order to do that. And there's been some tremendous developments even in the last 18 months or so here at Acadia. I see, I think Nancy's on the call, so I'll do a little shout out to the development office. They've been just absolutely tremendous. They've hit it out of the park in terms of their support for student mental health on this campus. We've been able to identify additional resources that are really critical to moving beyond just the in-counseling center type of work. It's allowed us to adapt and develop a new platform for service delivery with the step care model. It's allowed us to expand, and last October, the post-secondary student mental health standards were released by the CSA. We've been able to, with the support of the development office, to have an external audit done of our programs and services. We've got a strong report with recommendations, and we're going to be launching a working group to develop a mental health strategy here on campus. So students, faculty, and staff will be part of that effort. Over the last 4 years, we've also developed a strong relationship with the provincial Labor and Advanced Education, Department of Labor and Advanced Education, with the provincial government, and they've really stepped up. Nova Scotia, if you're a parent that's looking for a province to consider for post-secondary education, Nova Scotia is one of the leading provinces around student mental health. The Labor and Advanced Education has put resources into an online suite of resources that are available to all students in the province. Many of those resources are 24/7 resources, and they're there to support students exactly when they need it and to supplement and complement the services that we have on campus. So we've seen that growth and development, and it's happening faster all the time. We're continually being asked to advise and provide information about the types of programs and services that we need, and that work that folks in development, that folks in other areas of the campus are doing to encourage families and donors to contribute to the portfolio around student mental health has been game changing for us. So we've got some really good initiatives that are going to be launched this fall, and we're just going to continue to build on that to make this a place that all students feel they can be successful at.
If I may make an observation around mental health and student support and student situations, 20 years ago, we didn't talk about mental health near as much as we do now. But an important piece of that I've observed, and this is anecdotally just from experiences on campus and in the community, but also having two sons who are university age, that mental health is talked about a lot more now. And I don't just mean in terms of the supports and services that are provided, whether it be institutionally, provincially, or through the health system, but even in peer groups and even in our current student population. I think about students who are quite open about mental health support and the importance for support around mental health. I mean, we live in a very interesting, difficult, struggling world right now, with all kinds of social movements, truth and reconciliation, and what we're learning in our Indigenous community. Then you throw a pandemic on top of that. I mean, there's a lot going on for any of us, regardless of our age and stage in life, but particularly for our young adults. And it's so refreshing to see many of them being able to sort of really acknowledge and step up and say, my mental health is a priority for me. And knowing that resources exist is incredibly important. Asking for them is also important. Sometimes we find that we have resources available, and it's whether or not our students know where to ask or who to ask. So I think they're becoming their own best advocates at this time in our evolution, but also, just to sort of come full circle back to Acadia and the size of the campus and the size of the community, we also are afforded an incredible opportunity that, because we're so close-knit, it's relatively, I'm not going to say easy, that's maybe a little too tongue-in-cheek, but be able to recognize when somebody is struggling, and you've got a lot of people watching your back. And some people may say, no, I'm not down with that. I'm going to a larger institution because I'm not down with that. But, generally speaking, our small community, we really do have a great ability to look out for one another. So I'm glad to hear that there's lots of conversations moving forward, and that there's more things coming down the pipe. So we're certainly excited to hear about that. And you finished that explanation, James, by speaking of Acadia being a really great place for a wide diversity of students. And one group is, that we haven't spoken about specifically, and I'm just wondering if there is anything in particular for our population of students who are not identifying in either of the two typical binary worlds. And so if there's any sort of initiatives or comments that either you, James, or you, Janique, in terms of even your orientation planning around our students who are identifying as they versus he's or she's.
Well, I'll let Janique go first.
Yeah, so we have the Peer Support Center. One thing I love about Acadia is we have a lot of supports available. Specifically, our student-driven supports are amazing. So we have the Para Support Center, which is a student-driven support who will be active throughout orientation to help students no matter how they identify. We also, all of our employees who provide supports are trained to help students no matter how they identify, to make them feel comfortable and at home. And the counseling center is always open for all of our students.
Thank you.
I think, again, this is another example where, you know, students provided the leading edge to this work. It's been a couple of years now since it was through student leadership that Acadia adopted a preferred name policy, and that was one of the first initiatives, and I think gave credence to the idea that students could have an impact. I think the students felt very empowered and respected by the fact that they were heard around something that important. So, and I think over the last bit, if you look at some of the key individuals who have joined our campus leadership community in the past 18 months, Polly Leonard as our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Officer. This past winter semester, we were able to add a coordinator of sexualized violence response and education. And Allison is really, Polly and Allison are helping the rest of us to better understand and to better position the way that we communicate and the way that we acknowledge things, to think more openly and to not be bound by sort of our past practice or past sort of structures. So that's really crucial. You can have all kinds of good intentions, but you need the right individuals to help with the training and the leadership. And I think what we're seeing right now with our RA training, what we're going to see within some of the experiences for the first year students, we've got some tremendous leadership on this campus in this area, and I think that's going to be really serve us well in the next period of time.
Thanks, James. And I caught Polly's title, because certainly I've done a fair amount of work with Polly during her short time on campus already. What was Allison's title?
Allison is the coordinator, Sexualized Violence Response and Education, SVRE.
I don't do letters, but thank you for sharing that again. Those are a lot of words, but thank you for clarifying that for me. I have the last question is going to Janique, but before we get to that, I just want to reiterate, I have been keeping an eye on the chat function. I have not been seeing any questions or hand raises, so I will just offer that opportunity. Once again, I see a hand, so I will get to the hand in a second. But certainly we haven't had a whole lot of time to squeeze questions in because of the plethora of information and perspectives that you've been sharing. I just like using the word plethora. Nancy, over to you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Sure can.
Excellent. I am out walking home for homecoming, and what a great way to spend my walk, listening to this wonderful, I was going to call it a podcast. Well, it kind of is when I'm just listening as opposed to looking. I've got you in front of me now, but I don't want you to see me at the moment. Anyway, I really just wanted to say, on behalf of the Office of Advancement, thank you to all of you for offering this session. I've gone to all the sessions, and each one is great. I would like to thank Oonagh. She's just been doing a great job as the moderator of these. I think it was mentioned, and thanks James for the shout out. I do want to say the campaign for Acadia, which I'm sure everybody knows concluded successfully last year, really saw a huge surge of support for enhancing what we offer in student services. And so we will be seeing a lot of improvement and new programs and continuing support, as opposed to where's the money coming from every year going forward. So loving working with James on seeing some of those things through, and a big thank you to the Alumni Association, because they've stepped up in a leadership role to when we did the family campaign for Acadia, which was really a lot about mental wellness supports, and they did a matching program, and so we were able to leverage that and raise more money. We are talking to alumni and donors every day about the needs, and alumni are really stepping up. So I just want to do a general thank you to all of you, and to the alumni in general for the support. I think that's it.
Perfect. Thank you, Nancy. And I did the task of lowering your hand for you so that you didn't have to worry about that.
Thank you.
And you're multitasking as you do every day.
Well, it's getting dark and windy out here, and I got tired of looking at a screen, so I'm exercising.
Perfect.
Thanks, everybody.
And as Nancy said, walking for homecoming. And as the Executive Director of Alumni Affairs, one might think that homecoming is my favorite time of year. Full disclosure, in this session, and it is being recorded, Welcome Week and Orientation Week still remains my favorite time of year. And I often get asked, how can you say that if you're now the Executive Director of Alumni Affairs? And my response quite simply is, because without Welcome Week, we wouldn't have homecoming. So we do such a fantastic job of the campus coming to life during Welcome Week. Obviously, last year was a completely different scenario. This year, we are cautiously stepping into our campus community, opening up again and welcoming students back. For those who may or may not know on the line, we are welcoming our students back. The campus will remain closed to the public for the first part of the year as we get folks back in and situated and safe. But my final question to Janique is to ask how our community can get involved. And so you did reference very quickly at the very beginning about campus members. So folks who work on campus, part of the on-campus community staff and faculty. So if you could recap that quickly, and then community members in general and how we can get involved and how we can provide support.
Awesome. So community members who are alumni, you can sign up to be a volunteer to help welcome students to campus, to help with the move-in process, or if you want to be at our info booths to greet students and give them directions around campus as well. That's for both staff members at Acadia and for community members. James, do you have anything to add? Am I missing?
I don't think so, no.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Well, and for those of you who aren't physically near us, you know, the virtual world is a wonderful world. So as the excitement builds for the year to begin, you know, shout outs to campus, shout outs to our incoming students on the World Wide Web is always a possibility. You know, whether it's through Facebook posts or Instagram posts, letting our students who are coming in for the first time, and for those students returning, that they're not just joining a family of 3,700 students. They're in fact joining a larger family of about 36,000, 40,000 alumni. So it's a much bigger Acadia family out there that we love for our new students to know about. So thank you, Janique. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, James, very much for being here this evening. You know, it gives me the warm and fuzzies knowing that we've got such great people leading the way and continuing to contribute to our student experience. It makes me miss it a little bit. I have to be careful. My boss is on the line. I don't want her to think that I want to go back to student service and jump ship in alumni. Just teasing. And thank you to everybody on the line for joining us this evening. As I said, once again, we have recorded this session, so we will be sharing the link for those who weren't able to make it. We'll be sharing it, you know, it'll be on our YouTube channel and it'll be on our events page, and we can share it through the resident system and through the alumni system and the student recruitment system. So you may see it over and over and over again. We did have a draw for some Acadia swag stuff, and the winner is Gwen Williams. So thank you for joining us this evening, Gwen. We will get some contact information and make sure that we get some fun stuff out to you. Thanks again, everybody. Enjoy the last couple of days of August and look forward to seeing you all in one way, shape, or form in the next few months.